Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you may be joining us in the world. Welcome to dBASE Plus 8 with ADO, an in-depth tour. My name is Mike Roslog, and I am the Master of Ceremonies this evening for this webinar. So let's get into it. No sense waiting. The agenda today is going to be, we're going to go into a little introduction on how to use the webinar software. And then we're going to do a fairly good dive into the product and talk a little bit about the drag and drop features, talk about the textures and graphics, talk about the high precision math, how it works, how you can use it. We're then going to get into ADO and some of the key features of ADO. We'll get into SQL Builder and the new features around the SQL Builder structure, and we'll end it up with data modules. After that, of course, we will be taking questions throughout the presentation, and of course, at the end, we'll say thank you and all that good stuff from that standpoint. So, who's on the call? Well, my name's Mike, and I'm the CEO. Kathy's the head of technical support. Jeff is the head of marketing. Paul is the director of sales, and Alonda is also in sales. So you may have talked to one of them or all of us at one time or another. And so we're all here to help and try to make sure that you understand all the great features, functionality, and capabilities that are found inside of the new dBASE Plus 8 with ADO. So with that, let's dig into it. Let's get into the new features of dBASE Plus 8 with ADO. And there's a lot of things that are new inside of this product. Starting at the top of the list, we really talk about Windows 2012 Server and also Windows 8 support. We tested the product with that throughout the entire development cycle, trying to make sure that we had a functioning software. We also have the new look and feel, which most of you may or may not have seen yet, but there's a lot of capabilities around the new look and feel. You can really set up your environment whichever way you like to have it set up. We have the new ADO support, of course, which is different than the BDE. And yes, you can have, you can do one thing in BDE, you can do another thing in ADO, and there's ODBC connections, and we can talk more about that if need be. We have the new graphics and textures as part of the product so that you can give a little bit more of a professional look and feel to your products that you're building with it. We have the brand new SQL Builder, which allows us to work with ADO, SQL, and dBASE files and build localized SQL or server-side SQL. We have the new high precision math included in there. We'll be doing a couple of examples of high precision math. We've also been updating the help. There's a lot of new features inside the help. We've got ways to get to the knowledge base from inside the help. We've got ways to get to the news groups from inside the help. So we've tried to make the help a lot more usable for you. Also, keep in mind that the help will be one of those products that keeps on getting updated throughout. So as we get more examples, as we update more documentation, we'll be putting out the help examples. Hopefully about once a month, we'll have a new help for ADO. For the dBASE Plus 8 with ADO. We've updated the Project Explorer. We've done a lot of fixing and a lot of moving around, making sure things work inside of the Project Explorer with this new product. And keep in mind, one of the things we really worked a lot of time on was to make sure that you could have the older versions of dBASE loaded on your computer and also have the new version, dBASE Plus 8 with ADO or dBASE Plus 8 Personal loaded onto your machine at the same time. So you can have both of them on your machine at the same time. Plus there's a whole bunch of other capabilities, features, functionality. We've done a lot of updates to this product, and we're pretty excited to talk about it and show kind of some of the new things that it can do today. Okay, so with that, we're going to get into the demonstration. It's time to get into it, and let's see what we can do with this thing. So I'm going to go ahead and minimize my presentation, and I'm going to go ahead and bring up dBASE Plus 8. Now the first thing you should notice with dBASE Plus 8 is the fact that it does look different than the older dBASE or the prior dBASEs. And that was really intentional. We really wanted to make sure that there was a stark contrast between the dBASE 2.8, 2.7, all the way back to 2.0. We wanted to make sure that there was a stark difference between what it looked like before and what it looks like now. And there's a lot of new features just built into the top level interface that I want to go over with you guys. One of the first things you'll notice is that we have now this tab manager up at the top. Now the tab manager represents the open windows inside of your environment. So if I click on the navigator, it brings up the navigator. If I click on the command, it brings up the command. And as I open up more designers and more files and things like that, I can easily click through those items on my desktop, and it'll bring focus to whichever item or whichever tab I point to. Now, one of the things you may or may not be able to see on your screen is that there are little right and left arrow keys and X's. As you can see, I've got something that will close right over here. So you can maximize and take up the entire space. You can minimize it just like you would before. And then you can also minimize down at the bottom and bring it back. And you have also noticed that you also have the brand new graphics. All the graphics elements inside of the product have been updated so that you can see, it hopefully gives you a better recognition with the different products and capabilities of what's going on with the product. Of course, some people will want to come in and make things smaller. So instead of having the large icons, they might want to go to the medium icons, or maybe even the small icons if they want, or they can stay with the larger the larger graphic elements. Also, new toolbars. We tried to make sure that we match the toolbar's functionality, but it has a different drawing capability, different functionality from that standpoint. One thing that I want to go over from the standpoint is the help. Notice that we have the new help process inside of here to where we can bring up the welcome 8, and then we can drill through all of the stuff, and we have links to where it'll take you inside of it to those areas, so that we tried to make sure that all of them had headers, and we tried to make sure everything was cleaned up. A couple of things. When you go inside of it, the introduction to dBASE plus 8, a couple of things in here. You can go into what's new, and that'll go over the high-level features for you. Also in ADO, there's a couple of other things in here underneath concepts. And if you want to understand the differences between BDE, ADO, and ODBC, that gives you a little bit of an idea in there. So keep that in mind. Notice up here we have the FAQ. We have the news groups up here. So if I wanted to, I could click on the news groups from within inside the help, and I could go ahead and interact with those pieces or with the groups from that standpoint. Again, it was just trying to make it so you did not have to leave the environment and be able to go do those types of things. So that's just a really quick overview on that. Now the next thing, as I said, this environment allows us to basically configure it to our liking, and that's one of the things we really wanted to do in this. So if you notice, my toolbar up here has these little dots on it, and that basically means that it's draggable from where it's at. So I can come in here, and to start a drag, I click my left mouse button and I pull it down. Now notice it has different sizes, and I can open it, I can close it, I can bring it back up, I can put it back where I want it. Notice that I can put it on the side if I so desire, or I could put it on the other side if I so desire, and I can keep that wherever I wanted, wherever I think that those toolbars will be best placed for my interaction with the product. So again, it gives you that customizability from that standpoint. So I can come up here, put it back in from that standpoint, and play with that right there. So you have the ability to put that in there and to be able to work with that. The other thing you can do is you can also do the menus. And one of the things, especially if you're in a multiple monitor type setup where you have 2 monitors running on your machine, it's sometimes really, really nice to be able to go in there and move your menu to the other monitor and to separate out your product a little bit. And with that, we can do that. Now, the way you separate the menu from its placement is to double click on the menu bar. So this entire line is the menu bar. So if I come up here and I double click on it, you'll notice that when I double click, it popped off the menu. And if I minimize or reduce the size of my window, you'll notice that I can bring it outside of my window and I can have it floating anywhere. So if I have multiple monitors, I can have maybe my form designer on one, and I can have my menu bar on the other, being able to control the things on the other monitors. And there's a lot of people with multiple monitors that find that to be really easy and well like that kind of capability in it. And so one of the things we really tried to do with dBASE plus 8 with ADO was to give the developer the customization they need to get the most productivity out of the environment that they can. Now, a couple of other things that we have in here. As I said, we have this window navigator up here, so I can come up here and click on whichever I want. We also, when we go into the view, a couple of things you can do with inside of here is this is called the NDI tabs, and you can have it on the top or you can have it on the bottom. Again, it depends on what you like. Now, we set it up so it's always on the top. If you like it on the top, if you like that tab bar to be on the top, that's great. If you like it on the bottom, also nice. You can also not show it at all. If you want that extra screen real estate and you don't want to deal with it, you can just turn it off. And it works just like it did back in the older versions of dBASE where you did not have the tab bar allowing you to manage your windows and structures that way. Now again, like I said, I like mine to be on the top part of my window. I think it's easier to find stuff and work with it that way. Again, you may find it a little bit different. Another thing that we've done inside of here is we also implemented themes inside of the product so that you can pick additional themes. If you don't like the black look and feel that we set it up, and again, remember, we're trying to make it so that when you load it up for the first time, you see that there's a true difference between dBASE of old and the dBASE of new. So when you come in, let's say you don't like this dark gray, you don't like the black color kind of thing, you can come into it and you can say, view, and then you can go into your application themes. Now we include a number of different themes that you can pick from and select one that looks like it used to, which is the system theme. If you want that one, you can also come in here and you can pick a different view from there, go into your application theme, pick aqua, and it's going to be a different little color blue, and it has different highlighting for the windows and things like that. And but most of the stuff should look fairly close. The functionality stays pretty close to the same as it did before. So that kind of gives you an idea just of where the theming is, and it allows you to make it look the way you want it to look so you're as productive as possible. So we come into here, and I'm going to go back into the application themes, and I'm going to put it back on black. I'm a little bit partial to this look. I got very used to it during the testing, and I enjoy this, the contrast of this. So now that we've done a little bit of the modifications on the outside, let's go in and take a look at some of the other things that you can do inside of the product, just so you understand how things work. So I'm going to come in here and say File, New, Form, and this is going to bring up my wizard, and I'm going to go ahead and go into the designer. Now when I go into the designer, I can go ahead and pull off all of my inspector, my field palette, my component palette. I can pull those off and have those floating just like I used to have them floating before. One of the new features inside of the dBASE Plus 8 environment is the ability for us to lock or to bring in and lock or dock the tool windows in the environment. So we always know where those tool windows are going to pop up. We always know where they're going to be. And so we have a lot of creativity and functionality with that if you want. So if you take your inspector, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to start a drag environment. So I'm going to go in and click on the top level where it says Untitled Inspector, and I'm going to hold down my left mouse button and start to drag it. When I do that, you'll see that little boxes appear on the screen. Over on the left, you see the little box here with the arrow. And when I put the inspector on that box, it's showing me where it's going to be placed in the environment. If I go over to the right and do the same thing, it'll show me the exact same thing on the right. And then I have one in the middle, and if I go on the right or if I go on the left, it'll actually show me where it's going to do it. Now if I let up my left mouse button, it'll automatically lock that tool window in that dock position wherever I point it to. Another thing you can do is that you can do a couple of other things with this. You can take your component palette then, or another tool window, and you can drag it over to the already docked tool window. And as you notice, we have some functionality. We can put it to the top, we can put it to the bottom, or we can make a second tab with it. So if I wanted to, I could make it a tab. So I could have my inspector on one tab, and I can have my component palette on another tab. Now, you may ask, hey, how do you pull that tab off there? How do I want that? Well, you can just drag the component palette, just like I did right there. I clicked on the tab, and then I just dragged it off, and it'll automatically drag off. You can also come in here and then drop it down so it's separated, so we have the two. So I can, if I have a lot of items that I want to look at, I can move this around, or I can go ahead, drop a tab. I can bring it over, and then I can bring this over as well. So I can configure this to be any way I want. I can also come in and say View, and if I go into my tool windows, I can bring in the field palette, and I can say, you know what, I want my inspector over here to the left. I want my component palette underneath, and then my field palette, I want it to be a tab. So it's now, I've got the component and field palettes tabbed on here. And now that I have this configured the way I want, if I leave, I can come back in. So I don't really need my field palette right now. So I can just come in here, click on the X, get rid of it, come back over here, drop this in as a color, drop it in, and we can leave it set right there. So you have the full capability of being able to drag your tool windows and put them wherever you desire inside of your form. So if I wanted it to look like this would be fine as well. As I said before, I'm fairly partial to having this set up to where it's all in one spot for me so that I can find it and I always know where it's at. Also, we have the expanding palette now. So you can come in here and make it a single structure, or you can come in here and make it multiples, and of course we have all the different components inside of here. So if I would exit out, now that I have this set up, if I want to exit out of here, click say no, we'll come back in, restart it, and if we come in and create a new form, you'll notice that when I go into the designer, all of my locations are saved and all that kind of stuff for that process. So that gives us a quick idea of how to do that. The next thing I want to do is I want to show you just a couple of things about how to set up your environment for using the textures and graphics. Now I have a full example that I'll bring up here in a second, but I just want to show you a couple of things inside of here and to go over a couple of the issues and things with the product so that you get an idea of what's going on. So I now have a form up right now. And this form, I want to do a couple of things with it. The first thing I want to do is I want to put a new icon on the form. Now, it's important that hopefully you guys understood when I said I want to put a new icon on the form. Notice down here in my visuals, I have something called icon. Now, that means that it's usually an ICO, and this is where you normally want to keep an ICO ready to go for it. Okay, and so with the new graphics that we've included from Glyphix, we include a set of graphics that you can use with this. So if you click on your wrench, it'll come up and ask you to put your file name in there. Go ahead and click on your pencil, and then most people go, hey, where are the graphics located? Well, the graphics are actually located in your program data directory. So if you come into your C drive, usually program data is located underneath your program files x86. Now, this is sometimes a hidden file, so you may have to go into the File Explorer and unhide hidden folders. So you go in, you click right mouse click on and unhide hidden folders. Once you find your data, program data directory, double click on it. You go into the dBASE, go into the +8, and then go into media, and then all of a sudden you'll get the images. When you go into images, you'll see two types of images. You'll see the textures, and you'll also see the Glyphix libraries. Now, there are multiple things that you can do with the Glyphix libraries, and they have multiple things. So there's one called XP, and there's one called Arrow. XP is basically for Windows XP and below, and the Arrow is for Vista and above. The cool part is you can use Arrow with XP. There's no problems using those graphics. So for me, I usually stay with the Arrow graphics all the time. So I come in here, I go into the CE. You'll notice that there's an image guide, and it's a PDF file that if you go into the image guide inside of all the subdirectories of it, you'll see that there's an image guide, and it'll basically tell you what it's there for and what to use those items for. When I come in, I want to pick an ICO. So I see an ICO, I click on it, and I want to pick a 32 by 32, and I can come in here and I can pick whichever of the objects that I want to go ahead and pick from inside of here. So for this one, I'm going to go ahead and we're just going to pick this home 32 ICO, and I'll say OK. And then we'll say OK again. Now, the important part is to remember is that it doesn't change the form here. When we go out and save it and run it, it'll be different. The next thing I want to do inside of here is I also want to change the background, and I want to use a texture for that. The way you do this is you come in and you go into your visuals and you click on your background, click on your wrench, click on your pencil, and then we're going to go back up and we're going to go into the textures. So I'm going to go all the way back up until I'm in the images to where my textures are at. Now, when you go into textures, you'll see that we have a lot of different color textures inside of here. So if I can go into blue, browns, greens, magentas, different backgrounds for different things. And you'll notice that we have different sizes in here. So the first one is 800 by 600. The second one is 1024 by 768. The next one is 1152 by 864. So we put in all the common sizes for you so that you can have a good process when you put your textures as a background. I'm going to use the gray one, and you'll notice it looks a lot like the gray inside of dBASE. Now, if you also notice, and for some people they might not have the graphics capabilities to see this, but as you can see right over here, this is at 800 because the pattern is being tiled, so you'll start seeing the new pattern again as it comes into the product. So we can go ahead and minimize that. Now, before I bring up my example, my full example, the one other thing I want to quickly show you guys is that when I go into the component palette, I'm going to want to drop a rectangle down. And when I drop the rectangle down, you'll notice that it's got a gray background, all of that kind of good stuff. And I just want to make it so it looks like it's supposed to on here. A couple of things you need to do. Okay, first thing, when you go back into your inspector, one thing that I hope you notice is that the inspector now has the ability and it sorts all of your items in the access that what you would expect them to. So I want to work with a couple of things. So I might want to come into here. First thing I want to do is change the text, and I want to say hello from dBASE plus 8 with ADO. That's the first thing I want to do. So I set my text. The second thing I want to do is I want to come down to my visuals, and I want to change my transparent to true. And when I do that, you'll notice that it changes to the background color, and then I have a transparent box container that I can use. Now, the hello from dBASE 8 with ADO kind of doesn't show up very well because it's the wrong color. So to change that, I can come into my color normal, click on that, and I'm going to change my foreground color to white, and I'm going to say OK, and then you'll notice that it changes from that standpoint. Now again, remember that the graphics you want to use with the items that you're using are kind of particular in a sense. They want to make sure that you're using the right ones. So ICOs or icons are used in the build process when you're using PE or you're building your project. From the command line, you put in your ICO there. Those are used for the display inside the operating system, and you can have multiple versions of that ICO. In other words, there can be multiple images in the ICO file. When you're working with buttons and you're working with other items that have graphic elements on it, I recommend using BMPs, pings, or using the actual GIF files inside there. And also JPEGs are available as well. We also support TIFFs also. But the idea is ICOs are really for certain parts, the form and what it's generated for. The other parts of it is used with the other structures. So let me go ahead. I'm just going to save this really, really quickly, and I'm going to go up one directory, and I'm just going to say webinar 2, example 1, and we'll save this. And the only thing I really want to show with this is that when I run the product, you'll notice that my form, the little guy up here with the house, is actually, that's the new icon that we changed it to, was the 32-bit house, and that's where it's being displayed up in that. And it's also showing with a transparent color so that it looks like it's supposed to when it's on your form. Okay, so I just wanted to show that. Now, the next part of this that I want to get into very quickly is I want to go ahead into my navigator, and I'm going to go into my forms, and I'm going to go to the proper directory, and I'm going to go down here, and I'm going to pull up my webinar example, my completed webinar example, and we'll go ahead and bring it into the designer. Now, as you can see inside the designer, we have pretty much the same thing as we had before, what I was building before, but it's completed, and that way I don't have to go through step by step with everything. The only couple of things that I want to make highlight of is when you go ahead and drop an entry field down, when you drop your entry field down on your form, you know, if you're going to be working with numbers or something like that, when you go into your value, which is 0, there's a little T over here, and you might want to click on that and make it numeric. So just so you know, so you want to go ahead and click that, make it numeric. So, you know, or you might want to set it to whatever data type that you want for that behavior that you're expecting out of it. The other thing is that when you're setting up your graphics, there are multiple graphics that you can set up, and inside of our bitmaps right now, we actually have multiple setups. So you have the up button, which is the standard behavior when it's just sitting there. We have a focus button, and a focus is when you've clicked on it or you tab to that visual item, and it's got like the selection criteria around it. That can have a different icon to it, and I'll show you what I mean by that. We also have the down icon, so when you push the button, what's it show when it's in the down position? And then we also have the disable button inside of there. So let's go in there and take a look at a couple of things. So if I go ahead and I run this really quickly, first thing you notice is that I've got my little house up here. Next thing you notice is when I come into the tab, notice that now there's a outline around my button. So this now has a focus to it. And notice that the focus is now with a different icon. If I tab one more time, notice the icon goes back to what it was before. And if I go back to my clear, if I click on that clear, notice that again I have a different icon. I'm holding down the left button as we speak right now, and then I can go ahead and clear out that. It's still in focus, so it's showing the focus icon, and then when I go off of that icon, it now goes back to the standard icon. So you can have multiple icons for multiple behaviors inside of the product. So again, it's just really being able to show how those parts work together. Now another thing is that I might want to come into here and I might want to set up a disabled button. Okay, now I want to go in, and the reason why I want to go in and show this disable button, I want to show you guys how to do this inside of the product, is because there is a little bit of a interesting there's an interesting process for dBASE that it likes a certain transparency color. And I want to make sure that you guys understand what's going on with that. So I'm going to go in here. We're going to put in a disable button inside of here. So I'm going to go into my images. I'm going to go into Glyphics. And I'm going to go into my arrow just like I did before. I'm going to pick SE. I'm going to go into the arrow, and I'm going to go into bitmap. And this time I want to go to SE. I want to go to CE. I'm sorry. And I'm going to go into arrow, and I'm going to go into bitmap. And I want a 48 by 48 icon inside of here. And I'm going to double click on it. Now when you notice inside of here your icons, you'll notice inside that they have a fuchsia color, and it's a bright fuchsia. And some graphic elements, some Windows graphic elements are looking for a light fuchsia. Some of the other graphic elements are looking for a dark fuchsia color. What we've done is we've actually made it so that we include both for you. So when you're in the bitmaps and things like that, this is the light colored fuchsia, which is a 256/256 on the color scale. And then we have the 128/128 fuchsia, which is a much darker fuchsia. So as you can see right here, I have all the icons. So I have this is the left icon, This is the disabled icon, and this is the hot icon. So it's got a little bit different shading when it's a hot icon. Now what I want to do is I want to come down to my X, and I want to pick my disabled icon, which I did before, and I want to hit the open button, and I want to hit the save right there. So when you're in using buttons and you're using bitmaps, you want to use the 128 or the dark color fuchsia if you're using the glyphics, and if you're building graphics yourself or you're using a graphics library that you purchase from somebody, you're going to want to make sure that you set it to the 128/0128. On toolbars, that's a completely different thing, and it has a different color. Toolbars expect a 192, 192, 192. So for that to show as a transparency color. And so there's some issues around that you just need to be aware of, some idiosyncrasies around Microsoft and things like that. So now that I've done that, I should be able to come up here and on my button, and I should be able to say that I want it to be enabled to false. And now notice when I did the enabled to false, it now shows the disabled button just as you would expect it to. So now if I would run this and go ahead and run the product, I could come out here and put in a 1, come out here, put in a 2, and then hit the add. Well, it made 3, and I can clear it, and we can close out of it. I disabled it, so we can close out of it. So that's just giving you a quick idea of how to use the graphics. Some of using the professional graphics that we've included from Glyphics, also using the textures inside of it from that standpoint. So before I go into high precision math, I'm going to go out here and see if there's any questions that need to be answered, and it looks like all the answers. What's the differences between C and SE graphics? Great question. The inside of the directory structure, there is that image guide, and it'll explain what the differences are. One of the big differences is that it basically has different sizes of the items. So you don't get as large of items in the CE as you do in the SE. So other than that, I think that is the only one that was not answered. So I am going to now go on to the high precision math. So one of the new features inside of dBASE Plus 8 is the new high precision math. And you may be asking yourself, why do I care? What's the big deal about high precision math? All of those types of questions. And the big thing about high precision math for me is the fact that it allows you to do some really great calculations if you have numbers and you need a little bit more precision of your numbers. And let me give you a couple of examples of what I'm talking about. So if I come in here and I say set precision to 15, and I say set decimal to 15, and then I come in here and I want to do what's a test called perfect. It's called perfect precision. And so now I've got my precision and I've got my decimal set to 15. And if I would come in here and say question mark 301 period 84 0001, or excuse me, 2, I'm sorry, and I minus 301 dot 000001. Okay? So it should come back as 301, and it should come back with the 1 on here. So let's go ahead and hit the enter key, and you'll notice that it comes back with a number of 0.840001, but then all the way up we got 0.29, and that's because some of the external bits get set and the precision is off. So if I come in here and I say set precision, precision to 34, and I say set decimal to 34, and then I go back up there and I run the test again with the add and subtract, or the subtraction, and I hit enter, you'll notice that now it comes back because it's got higher precision. It doesn't have, it understands how to take that fraction of a number and actually not have the other parts of the fraction of the number come into it. So having it set to a high set will allow it to have better precision and give you a more accurate number in that case. Now, this doesn't just mean for numbers like that. We could have a number, something like this. We'll go question mark 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, period. And then we'll go 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And then we'll say that, multiply that by 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, dot 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay, so large numbers, doing a big multiplication, hit the enter key, boom, we've got the perfect precision, and you can go out and test against that to see what's going on with there. You can also do things like question mark 1 comma 0, or 1 divided by 0. What should we get? Infinity. You can't divide by 0, but it does give an infinity error. We could also come in here to question mark 21 divided by 110 and hit enter, and it is actually, that is the correct financial number, or the right scientific number. The next thing I want to show you, and again, you can just so you know the math, you can do 1.23456 7, and then times that by 10 to the 5th power, and you can get the right answer from that as well going through that. This next one I want to do really quickly is I want to set this, and I want to show the difference again between the set precision. I'm going to go back up here and do a set precision 15, and I'm going to set my decimal back again to be 15. And this time I want to show you why this is important and why you might want to use the high precision math. Now remember, most numbers are set up with the high precision. When you put in the numbers now, everything goes with full precision. So that's one thing to keep in mind. Now the high precision, the one thing I want to do is say A equals, and we will go in here and say 1, 2, 3, 4 dot 5, 6, 7. We'll say B equals 45 point, and then we'll come into here, and this is 6, 7, 8, 3, 4. And then we'll come in with C, and we'll say equals 0.0004. Okay? Now, here's where we got the precision set down to 15. We have our decimal set down to 15. And here's where it kind of makes a difference, right? If you've got the right precision. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say question mark, and I'm going to say parentheses, A plus B, end parentheses, so it's going to do that calculation first, plus C. And when I hit enter, you'll notice that I get a number of 1280, long number. Then if I come in here and do a question mark, and I do A plus, open parentheses, B plus C, close parentheses, and hit enter, you'll notice that I have a different number. And that's the reason between the fractional number and having it set to basically 22-bit precision and not having it set up as a high enough precision set for it. Now, if I go in there and I would set up my precision, so I'm going to come up here to set precision 34, and I'm going to set my decimal back to 34. Okay, so now I'm back into the high precision structure again, and now I'm going to do that test again. I'm going to go A plus B inside parentheses plus C. I hit enter. Notice I don't get that fractional number at the end of it because it can actually calculate it properly. It's not a 3999999 or a 40001. And if I go back up and run that other one, the A plus B and C in parentheses, and run it, you notice it gives me the exact same number again. So again, it depends on where the fractional number is done when you have a lower precision and how it actually calculates that. So you can have the same equation come up with different answers in that structure. The new high precision math gives us that capability to go out there and really dig into it from that standpoint. So now I'm going to turn this over to Kathy, and she's going to go ahead, and while Kathy is getting set up for her side, I'm going to come out here and see if there's any questions that people may be having for me on this stuff that I've went over. No questions so far, so I'll turn it over here to Kathy, make her the presenter, and boom, Kathy's the presenter.
Okay, hello everybody. Sorry about that. Had to find me to unmute me. Um, the first thing I want to talk about real quickly, we're going to get into ADO and how to connect to other databases using ADO. But I want to talk quickly about the BDE and what it is and what it does. Now the BDE is the database engine for all DBF and DB tables. In other words, it is the default engine for all dBASE and paradox tables. Now it also has an ODBC socket layer that can allow you to use an ODBC DSN connection to connect to other databases. But the problem with doing that through the BDE is that the BDE itself does not support Unicode or user-defined or other data types. And it could also have some performance issues when trying to connect to external databases. So with dBASE plus 8, we've included a set of ADO database objects that can use both ODBC and OLE DB drivers to connect to external databases through an ODB or through an ADO, which is an ActiveX data object layer. So I'm just going to show you, first of all, how do we set up a connection to connect to an ADO through ADO to another database. Well, the main way to do that is to go up to Properties, and if we go to Desktop Properties, we'll go here to Connection Aliases. Now, just like your BDE database aliases, you can create an ADO connection alias. We'll do that right here. There's two main ways to set that up here. The first one is we're going to go into Windows Explorer, and I'm just going to go into plus. I'm going to go into my folder here, and I already have one of these set up. There's a file called a UDL file. It's also referred to as the Universal Data Link file. And to create a new one, it's very simple. You just right-click, go to New, and just start a new text document. Name it whatever you'd like to. We'll just call this New Connection. And then just change the TXT file extension to UDL. And then hit Enter to save it. And then, of course, it'll ask you if you want to save. And then if you double-click this, pardon me, you can see here that the icon has changed. Microsoft recognizes this as a particular type of file called a Universal Data Link file. So if I double-click on it and open it, it brings it up in a Data Link Properties dialog. This allows you to create a connection to an external database using this little dialog instead of having to write out your own connection string, your own ADO connection string, which I'll show you how to do a little bit later. So in the first tab, the default provider is set up to be SQL Server. You can also use the OLEDB provider if you have an ODBC DSN set up. You would just choose this, go to your connection tab, and then you can see any ODBC DSN connection or DSN setups. You can choose them right here and connect to it through ADO that way. Another thing you can do is if you want to use the OLEDB provider directly to a SQL Server database, you can do that as well. Here's where you would enter your server name information, other information for logging onto the server. I already have one set up here that I'm going to show you. In this SQL Express Connect UDL file, I'll double click it, and we're actually connecting to, we have a SQL Server set up on a cloud server, and here's our information to connect to it. We have our username and password. We can set up the default database, and of course to test the connection we just click here to make sure that that connection is available before we even proceed further. And so I'll go ahead and say OK, and we'll close out of there. And to show you how that works in dBASE, right here I have this SQL test connection alias. To create a new one, we just type in the name here. I'll just call this SQL test 2, like we're going to do it from scratch. And then if I go ahead and I click on this pencil icon, we're going to connect using a UDL file. Click on the file, and then we go ahead and we find the file that we want to use, and just double click it to add it. And if we click on load here, it'll actually give us the connection string that is used to connect to that data. So we can either use the UDL file to help us create the connection string, or you could just write this connection string out without having UDL file available, and it would connect in exactly the same way. So we'll say OK, and we'll click Add and Apply and say OK. So if I go to, in the Navigator, if I go to the Tables tab, and I find that SQL Test 2 ADO connection alias I just created, it will find and connect to that data, and here are the tables that we have in that default database. The other thing you can do is, if you do not want to set up a connection alias, although I don't see too many reasons why not, but you can also just use the ADO database's connection string property. One way to do that is, we'll just go into this little test app that I wrote here. I'll right click and we'll go into the source editor. Now to set up an ADO database object just using code, straight up code, what we do here is D is the variable. We set that to the new ADO database object. We set the database object's connection string property right here, and if I wanted to, I could just grab a connection string from any one of these connection aliases, copy it. Let's find one where it's just, here's one where there's a Firebird connection alias. If I just copy that string, and then I could paste it in here if I did another one, and we could just paste that into that property, and that would give us the same results as, instead of having a connection alias, we would just have it set in the connection string property of the database itself. If you're ever wondering about, well, how do I figure out how to do the connection string if I don't do it through a UDL file? How do I know what properties I need to set? Because it's really different for different databases. A lot of internet sites, if you do any search through Google or whatever, you should be able to find examples of ADO connection strings for just about any other database there is. So if I say, let's say I want to do it for Firebird, and I say Firebird ADO connection strings, and I hit enter, and it brings me, the first site that I see here looks pretty good. It says connectionstrings.com/Firebird. So I'll go there, and oftentimes you'll see something like this. In fact, this site right here, connectionstrings.com, has many, many samples of many, many different databases. So it's really useful. So let's say I scroll down here, and the Firebird database that I have is I installed locally. It's not on a remote or a server. So this is the connection string I would want to use as my template. So you could just copy that off, paste it in your code. I want to leave my old connection string, so I'm just going to paste this down here to show you, and make sure it's on one line. Okay, and then all you would need to do is plug in the values for your particular database. So the password might change, the database name, which is just this FDB file, you may have a different one, and that's pretty much it. The driver for Firebird is usually just this driver, the user ID, and for different databases, like I said, you'll have many different, there's many different kinds of connection parameters that can be used here, and it's particular to different databases. This DB name parameter is particular to Firebird. In another database, it could be default or deep or a database. I can't remember, but there's different parameters for different connection strings. So I'm going to go ahead and close out of there. And I had my d dot active equal to true. So here's my ADO database using the connection string to connect to MySQL database. And then I'm using the ADO query object. And the query's database property is being set to the actual database object that we set up here. And then I have my select statement for MySQL. And then, of course, we're just setting that active to true. And then I have a quick bit of code down here that just goes from 1 to 10, and it gets me the first and last name of the employee, and it just gives me basically the top 10 list of names from the employees table in the MySQL database. So we'll go ahead and close out of there. And if we just run it real quick, the database object connects, the query then gets this information. Okay, the next thing I want to do is I just want to go ahead and clear things out. Okay, I want to show you some ADO objects and how they can be used on a form. So I'm going to go ahead and start a new form. And the first thing I'm going to do is I want to show you what happens when I click and drag a table, an ADO connected table. And we will use the MySQL database from earlier. And I'll just go ahead and click and drag this orders table over. Now, as soon as I do that, if we hit F12 to take a look at the source code, one of the things you'll notice if you're familiar with dBASE objects is the fact that there is an ADO query object, but there's no ADO database object automatically. Well, it's not really needed. With BDE tables, dBASE tables, paradox tables, you need to have the database object defined and then your query object, because you have to have the query's database object, database property connected to that database object. Well, with ADO queries, it has a database name property as well as the database property that we saw before that you can set to the connection alias that you set up. So it's not necessary to have the database or ADO database object unless you need to use some of the properties of that ADO database. Some of those properties I'll show you. We'll close out of there. And I'll go over here to the component palette and I will go to ADO Access. I will grab the ADO database object and drop that on the form. And then if I go into the inspector, I can show you some of the properties that are available through an ADO database, but not through an ADO query. Things like connection timeout, I believe catalog name, there's a schema name down here, information on the schema or the catalog depending on what type of database you're connected to. You can get that information in an ADO database object, but not in an ADO query object. Another really popular method of the ADO database is the execute SQL command, where you can execute very complex SQL commands. Okay, the next thing I want to do is I want to take that off. I'm going to close out of there. Okay, I want to show you the difference between a couple of these other objects. There's an ADO query and an ADO table, and they behave very differently. So we'll go ahead and I'm going to show you, first of all, I have an empty form here. I'm going to right-click, go into design form, and all I have on here is a grid, and I have this little title that says query, and below that it says table, and I have a second grid. The reason I have this laid out here is I want to show you the difference between an ADO query and an ADO table object. So if we go over here to ADO access, and I go ahead and grab a query object, I'll just drop that over there, and a table, and drop that there. And I'm going to connect to, I'll click on the first ADO query object, go into my inspector in the properties, and I need to set its database name property, and I need to move something over here. Okay, so I click on the drop down, and this will give you a list of the connection aliases that we set up earlier through the properties menu. So I'm going to use the MySQL database, and we have to set its query, its SQL statement, because this is a query, so we need to do a select statement. Select all from employees, and then we just set its active property to true. Whoops. What did I? Oh, I didn't save that. Select all from, oops, from employees, and hit enter to save it. If you don't hit enter, it won't get saved. And then just double click here and it'll change it to true, and it's become active. Then I'm going to go here onto the grid, and I'm just going to set its data link to that ADO query that we just connected with. And then in the table, you'll see a fundamental difference here. In the table, if we go to database name, same as with the query, we choose the connection alias that we set up, but instead of a SQL statement, we're just going to enter the table name. It's like connecting to the raw table rather than doing a query on it just to get the information. So we're going to set this to employees, and just like with the query, whoops, again, I didn't hit enter. And just like with the query, we're going to set its active property to true, and then I'll click on that second grid and set its data link this time to the table. Now here's the fundamental difference between the two. I'm going to run the form, and notice that up here with the query, if I try to type anything and edit it, I can't. Because right now the way a query is set up, and this happens with a lot of ADO objects, some are this way, some aren't. But with the ADO query right now, you cannot edit it. You cannot edit the data. It's simply for querying data. But with the table object, you can, because it is directly accessing the raw table and not going through a query. Oh, okay, so we'll close out of there. Okay, and I just want to close all. And I'm going to go over here and see if there's any questions that we have before I kick this over to Mike. Okay, need to open that up. Bear with me for a moment. Okay. Here we go. I don't think I'm seeing any unanswered questions. Here we go. Can you use a ADO table across the web to edit data? Oh, you can connect remotely, yes. I believe this is the answer to your question. Like that UDL that I set up for that remote connection to the SQL server that we have on a cloud server, we could use a table, ADO table object connecting to that database instead and do the same thing. So I believe that answers your question. Okay, so yes, with connection to server. Okay, is there a book like Ken's with this version? No. Right now, Ken's book that we have in there was written before all these changes came up with ADO and other changes that we've made to this product. So no, currently Ken's book does not have the changes that we have in this product. Okay. And do you use save, etc. with ADO table? Yes. Yes, you do. Ken's book is available when you purchase dBASE Plus. It's available for free. It's not available with the 30-day eval version, but when you get dBASE Plus 8, when you purchase it, you do get it automatically in PDF form. Included with, oh, I can't type. Okay. Will a save occur, WG? Not quite sure what you mean by that. Automatically as you move? Yes. In most cases, I've found that saves do occur automatically as you navigate. Okay. With Mervyn, will edition 3 of Ken's book be included with dBASE once it is published? That's it's kind of hard to say what's going to go on with a new version of Ken's book. But we will, as that information becomes available, we will make it available to you. Ira Berkowitz, even over the web, referring to your will a save occur as you move through the row set? I believe it should. I've seen it happen with our SQL Server on the cloud server. And okay. Oh, okay, Mervyn.
Can ADO access? Can ADO access DBFs? No, it cannot. You have to use the BDE with that.
Yeah, the BDE is, and you wouldn't want to. The BDE is the engine for dBASE and paradox tables. Yes.
Soon.
We are, Ira, we are working on parameters as we speak, very hard. So as soon as we have more information on that, we will publish that to you.
Kathy, I'm going to go ahead and take it back over from you.
Go ahead.
All right. Want to keep on going, guys. We still have a lot more to go through on this, as you can probably well imagine. The next thing we want to go into is really some of the SQL Designer, the new SQL Builder that we include inside the product. And it's really easy to get to that information inside of dBASE Plus 8. If you go into your navigator and you click on the SQL tab, you'll notice that there's a couple of things out there ready to go. From that standpoint, and you know that there's a new SQL. If you double click on that new SQL, you'll get a dialog that pops up, and it basically asks you some of the same questions that Kathy just went through with the ADO. Now, keep in mind that the new query builder does generate standard SQL for everything. And it also works across the BDE, it works across the ADO, and it also works with DBF files. So you can, and one of the things I think I need to explain, and I tried to explain it in a long answer to somebody up there, that the BDE allows us to talk to DBF files and paradox files, right? It also has something called an ODBC socket, and that means that it allows us to plug in an ODBC driver into that BDE environment, and it basically uses a pass-through. ADO uses what's called an OLEDB driver. The native driver for ADO is called an OLEDB driver, and it usually has a lot more capabilities, a lot more functionality than a regular driver does in an ODBC world. ADO, however, also has an ODBC socket in it that allows you to use an ODBC driver. So you can use ODBC with BDE, you can use ODBC with ADO, and you're going to be going through the ODBC socket layers of those two different data engines, okay? So if you need to get the DBF files, if you need to get the Paradox files, you have to use the BDE. If you're going to third-party databases, MySQL, PostgreSQL, you name the database, Firebird, whatever database it is, you can get to that through. If they have an OLE DB driver, you can get through it through that, or you can get through it through the ODBC. Now remember, the ODBC driver kind of limits what you can do, or the drivers limit or enable you to do things with that. So keep that in mind, that when you pick your database engine, when you pick your interface engine for it, whether it's the BDE or ADO, there are reasons behind it. Now I recommend ADO if you're building new and you're going to a third-party database, because it's been maintained. It's got a 32-bit driver, 64-bit driver, and things like that. So it's updated and it's complete. It also supports Unicode strings and things like that in it, which the BDE does not. So that kind of gives you another reason around that. Now, getting back to the SQL Builder, because of the way dBASE is set up, we have to support three different ways of connecting. You have to either support a direct connection through the BDE to the dBASE files, you have to support the directory to get the dBASE files, or you have to support an SQL connection to get to the drivers. So I'm going to go ahead and say close for right now, because I just wanted to show that you get this little driver set to come up in here. And so if I close that like I just did, it goes out there and it says, hey, what are you trying to build right now? You don't have any SQL out here. And one of the things that you always want to make sure of is when you come into your navigator that you actually pick where your SQL is located. If you don't, there's going to be some confusion inside of the environment. So a couple of things. You want to make sure if you're using ADO, you go into your connection properties and your connection aliases and you have those set up and established. Now, again, because ADO and the BDE uses layers, you can go through them in different ways. So if I go in here and create a new SQL, you notice I can have a drop down here. I have my SQL right here, which is going out to an MS SQL, and if I say OK, it'll go out and remotely connect to it, and I've got a couple of databases, I got a couple of tables out there for it. If I come into my navigator and double click on my SQL, drop this in here, and I want to go to my ADO or my SQL database, I can come in here and connect to that, and that'll connect remotely to it, and I can see all of my different structures out here. Also my stored procedures, if I have any stored procedures out there. I can also come in to my SQL, and I can also come into here and I can say, you know what, I want to use the BDE and I want to go out and look at the standard. And I can go out there and look at the standard as well. Another thing that I might want to be able to do is I might want to go out there and look at it from a directory structure like we've been able to do in dBASE for a very long time. So I can come out here to the dBASE +8 right here, click on it, and say OK, and I can get also all of my tables that way as well. So it's very important for you to set the location of the SQL of what you're connecting to. Are you connecting to a server? Are you connecting through the BDE? Or are you connecting through a directory structure? Okay. I'm going to go ahead and connect through a directory structure, but a couple of things I want to make a highlight of here. Inside of the SQL Builder, you'll notice that we have some objects over here that we're going to have that we're going to put onto here. We also have our designer area. This is where we're going to define our SQL, and then we have our expression characteristics or capabilities in here. Now, it would be really great if I had some additional databases that I could use. Something that's not a fish database or something like that. And it just so happens that I have, right before you guys, I have something that we're going to be releasing maybe in the next week or so called dBASE Data. Maybe, I don't know. Maybe we won't. But it's going to be a new service that will allow you to maybe get additional data sets that you may find to help you plug into your existing data. So, I'm going to use a couple of those today, and they're in DBF format. So I'm going to just go ahead and use them. They're in other formats as well, but I'm going to go out there and just use them. And I'm going to go in and let's say I want to use my U.S. state data. All I can do is if I double click on this, it'll automatically add that to the structure. And you notice when it added the table to the designer that it did a couple of things, right? It actually shows you all of the columns inside the database, and it also shows you what types are associated with them. So it gives you a quick thing. If you want to pick all of the items in here, you can come in and just click on the asterisk, or you can unselect that asterisk and come out here and select whichever ones you may want to select for your output. Now, hopefully you notice when I start selecting things, you're noticing that I'm seeing the expression over here. I'm seeing the objects being added, the expressions are being added, and I can see the expressions down here being added as well. So I have that capability to go out there. As I select these items, if I hit the F12 key, which will show me my structure, then notice here the SQL is basically saying I'm going to a directory, and that's why I'm telling the SQL designer what I'm doing, and then it's saying, hey, you're going to select the U.S. state data, and you're going to from the U.S. State data, and that's what you're going to be doing. Great. If I'm done with that, I can go ahead and exit it. If I want to, I can then come into here and I can add another thing. Let's say I want to look at the U.S. senators for this, and I can come in here and I can drag it. So I'm now initiating a drag with my left mouse button, and I'm now dragging it into the form itself. So now from here, I want to link those two tables together because I want to join them and I want to get certain information out of the structure. So I'm including all the state data here. So let me just open this up just a little bit. I'm doing all my state data here, and I might just want to get my name of the senator and the party associated with them. And I know from the data that I want to connect the abbreviation string to the state. So I drag from my abbreviation string and I drag it to my state string over in my U.S. Senators table. When I drop it, or when I let up on my left mouse button, it drops that link between the two, and now I have a line that actually goes between the two tables. If I click on that line, I can right mouse click on it and I can tell it how I want it to query my data or how I want the select to behave. And I can select from either the right or the left. I can also come into my properties and again select from the right, from the left, and make sure that the join is doing it the way I want it to be joined. So once I have that done, the next thing I want to do is, well, let's test this thing out. Let's see what it can do. So I'm going to go out here and I'm going to go ahead and hit the Save button. And I'm going to come out to my libraries. I'm going to go into my documents in dBASE and dBASE 8. And I'm going to call this my webinar 2 example SQL. And we'll go ahead and save that. And now I'm going to go ahead and run that structure. Now I'm going to just go in here and go to the table format. And as you can see, in my table format, I have all my information. There's Alaska, Alabama. And if I go all the way to the end, I get who the senator is for that process. And that may be great, all that kind of stuff, but I really want to have it look a little bit different than what it does right there. So I could come in here, of course, click on it, make it look different with my forms and the way it's laid out and all that kind of stuff. That's great. But what I want to be able to do is I really want to have my senator's name front and center. So I want my senator's name to be front. I want all the rest of the state data to be in there, and then I want, my party affiliation to be the last thing in there. Well, if you notice when I ran this, the first thing that came up was the state, right? It was the first name of the structure. So if I come back in and look at my SQL, well, the first thing that's in there is the state. Now remember, I said I'm going to pick asterisks, so I'm picking all of the columns. The first column in is state, and that's how it's actually laying it out. I now want my name, I want the senator's name to be first. Well, a way that you can do that is I'm going to come into my expression routine, and you notice just like we did with the toolbars over here, these little dots over here. And I can literally grab that dot and move it up one. And now the senator name is going to be first, data, and then party. So if I come out here and I hit the save button and I hit the run button, notice that I've got there's my senator's name. And if I go ahead and go into the form, there's all my information. I can come up here, go next, back, and I can go and do the filters just like you would normally expect to do it quickly and easily from that standpoint. So, and then the SQL that's actually generated, anytime I want to see it, I can go into F12 and see exactly what they're doing, and I can go ahead and do it, go back there and modify that and go back and forth between those two. Now, the other thing that I may want to do is I may want to make this so that it will sort in a different order than what we currently are right now. Now, instead of taking all of the data out there, I may only want to have I want to have the state, of course. I want to have the population rank. I want to have population total, and I may want to have the state slogan as my structure. And what I want to be able to do is I want to be able to um, order these or set up a sort order for off of my ranking or off the population rank. So I can come into the expression modification area, go to the sort order, and if I click on population rank, I want population rank to be ascending, and it's going to be the first, it's going to be the sort order number one. So I want it, that's going to be the top priority, is to sort it in ascending value. The second thing I want to do is I want to sort, because you have two senators per state, I want to sort in descending senator name structure in there. So I can come into here, click on my senator name, go into descending, and notice that sort order is the second one. And then you can set up additional criteria, aggregates, aliases, all the things that you normally do inside of SQL quickly and easily from that standpoint. And now I'm just going to save it, and I'm going to go ahead and run it. And now we've got a different structure. First state is California, and as we keep on going through there, you'll see that it goes down through the process of which states have the most population in the process. So you can come out of there that way. Now remember, the SQL that gets generated can either be brought in from a file when you're in ADO or the BD in the SQL, and you can load it by file, or you can just load up the SQL and have it work that way. Another thing, and I just want to do a really quick clarification, as Kathy, you said, and I just want to make sure everybody understands, when you're using an ADO query, if you set up your connection correctly with the cursors and setting up the cursor dynamics and things like that, you can modify your data. But remember, normally it's going to look for an insert, update, or delete if you want to do certain things. So, but you can make it so that you can update the data, and we are looking at making it act a little bit more like the BDE, where the BDE takes care of those additional SQL statements for you automatically. So again, the new SQL Builder, really nice piece of technology. It generates standard SQL. It does understand if you connect to an MS SQL. It does understand if you connect to an MS or MySQL. It does understand if you connect to Oracle, and it does modify it. Now, we have it set right now for generic. Maybe sometime in the future we'll turn that on to where you can optimize your connections and your generation of SQL to the database that you're doing it. Right now we're going with standard SQL across the board. So with that, I'll go out here and see if I have anybody asking any questions about uh, this. And across ODBC2, yes, absolutely. The one I'm showing right there, which is MySQL, or I'm showing dBASE right here. When I set it up with ADO, I have it going through an ODBC driver. So yes, absolutely. Is there a limit on the SQL string length? Not that I'm aware. I'm sure there probably is someplace. Probably 4,096 characters. But we can double check that. I don't know off the top of my head on that one. I don't know if there's actually a true limit on that one. Can you sort by a partial field? Partial field. Not need more information on that one. With regard to the queue, open database, and the use database, if I create a query from ADO connected table and then copy this to a DBF, can I use the XDML on that? Um, with regard to the previous question, open a database and use database name. If I create a query from the ADO connected table, can I then copy this to the DBF table so I can use XDML on that? Um, I'll have to let Kathy answer that one. I don't think I don't think I have the answer to that one off the top of my head right now. As far as partial fields, can I use functions in SQL like substrings? You can use stored procedures, uh, but as far as using functions, I don't believe that you can in the standard SQL. If you're going against something inside of you can do parameterized queries and things like that, but I don't know if you can just call a sub function in there. But all the functions in SQL, as far as how you're pulling in data and manipulating data, all of those are available to you in the SQL format from that standpoint. So Kathy, I will pass this over to you so you can go ahead and do the data module structure. So let me pass this over to you. And there we go. Kathy's got it. And
Okay, I'm back. We're just going to take a quick look at the data modules and how to set it up. So we're going to go to our data modules tab, and we'll just double click here on a new data module, and we'll go right into the designer. Now previously, somebody had asked about this too. We used to have a data module designer and a product called dQuery, which did more than just create data modules. It was a reporting tool. There were a lot of wizards. Um, it was a very large an application that had a lot of capabilities that we hadn't been able to update in recent years. So we've gone to a more streamlined, um, uh, purposeful data module designer that is strictly for creating the data module structure. We may be working on dQuery as an external product and including some of that functionality that we had before and updating it. But to streamline the data module designer and get it back to its purpose, we have a more simplified form designer-like data module designer. So we're going to go ahead here and to first add our tables. I'm going to use the dBASE samples. And I'm going to take two tables from the dBASE samples database and create a parent-child connection with them. And the first table I'm going to use is going to be the orders table. That'll be the parent. And then here's an order items table which has detail for each order. So for each order that we see here in this table, there's an order ID field, and it's unique for each row in the orders table. And then in the order items table, let me lower that down. In the order items table, we may have several rows for each order ID in the parent table. So we'll close out of that. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on the child table, and I'm going to go over here to the inspector. And if I scroll down here to its row set object, and we go down here to the master row set, we're going to set the master row set for this child table to be the orders table. And then the master field, of course, will be the order ID field. So that's all we need to do to set a master, a parent-child relationship on two tables. Now if we take a quick look, I'll hit F12 and we can take a look at the code that gets generated. Here's our orders query from the orders table. Then we have the order items query, and with the order items row set, we've set our master row set and master fields property. Now you can also perform some code with regard to any of the events, methods, or properties on any of these data objects and their property objects. In other words, here's the order items query. It has a row set object, a fields array, any of the code that you could do in a regular form or just by writing code you can do here in the data module. Just as an example of that, we'll go in here and go to the orders row set object. And if I go over here to the events, and if I, let's say that I want to make sure that when somebody goes to add a new row, something happens, I can do a check. But for this sample here, I'm just going to click on the wrench, and then we'll go into the source editor, and I'll just write a quick bit of code that just shows us that we've attempted to do an append on the row. So I'll just say can append. Okay. Now the reason I'm doing that is I just want to show you how the purpose of the data module is to be able to house a bit of code and a setup of your data and any code that you might want to perform on those data objects in one place and use them on multiple forms or reports or even programs that you write. That way you don't have to, if you have a particular set of data that you use across multiple applications or just form objects or whatever, you can do that in one place in the data module and then use that data module in multiple places. So if we go to a form here and we start a new one, let me close and save. Before I do that, let me close and save my data module. Okay, I'm just going to call it test. And if we go ahead and start a new form, and then we'll go into the designer, and we find that data module, and we just click and drag that over. We already have those objects all set up. In fact, if you go to the field palette, you'll see here we have both the orders table and the order items table, our queries, ready to go with any of their data. You can click and drag the individual fields over if you like, but I would rather just put this all in a grid. It's going to be much quicker for me that way. So go ahead to the component palette, and I'm going to just open this up here. And I'm going to add a grid for the parent table, and then a separate grid for the child detail table. Okay, and then to set that, to connect that grid, we'll go ahead and go into the inspector, and in the properties for the grid, we'll just data link to the top one, which will be the orders table, and then the bottom one, which will be the order items. And as you'll see, we'll go ahead and run the table, or pardon me, run the form. And as we navigate through here, it's connected, so the child table will only show the rows that are for the order ID of the row set that we're on in the parent table. And if I try to go ahead and append a new row on here, where's my append? Add a row. We get our little can append message. So you can just see how you can set up a data module to make it much more portable, much easier to have a particular set of data the way that you want it with additional code, and to be able to use them in multiple locations. So I'm going to go ahead here and see if we have any questions. Open this up. Okay. Whoop. Does that handle cascade deletes? Just like in it behaves the same way as a data module had in the past. I can't remember the exact proper behavior, but however it was handled previously, and I can research this for you, it handles it the same way in the current data module. Um, and I'll find that information out. I have a question about exe files. Um, an ADO connection. We have a question. I have a question about exe files. How do you handle to ADO connection? You mean in exe files or in the data module? I'm not quite sure what you're referring to there, but in the data module right now, we're working on making our ADO objects work inside of the data module. Hopefully that will be within the next, we're going to have a release, new releases coming up that will be updates, and we'll be improving the ADO capabilities with other objects in dBASE. Fast way to build DMD without dQuery in dBASE 2.8. Sorry, I keep losing the question. Fast way to build DMD without dQuery in dBASE 2.8. I use drag and drop with dQuery, trying to use SQL Designer, but the generated SQL file is read-only when dropped on forms. A lot of SQL files are read-only in some cases. If you're using ODBC and you're connecting through the BDE to another database, that could be an issue. It really, in some cases, the SQL file is not editable. In some cases, it is. It really depends on the driver and what you're connecting to. Go ahead, Mike.
Well, and also just keep in mind that if you a lot of times the BDE tries to write the four SQL statements for you. Remember, there are four when you're truly using SQL for your database access and database manipulation. There are four types of there's four types of statements that you basically work with, right? You work with a select statement, you work with an insert statement, a delete statement, and a modify statement. So you're basically going out there and you're updating your data structures as they are. The BDE will make that easy for you and automatically allow you, it'll write the four data sets for you. So when you say append, that's actually doing an insert in SQL if you're connected to an SQL database. And as Kathy was saying, with the ODBC drivers, there are limitations to the drivers and the databases. So you can see different behavior if the BDE can't automatically generate those for you. And there are times when you don't want the BDE to generate an insert statement for you. You don't want ADO to generate an insert statement for you. You want to have that control. So that's one thing to keep in mind. Um, what I'm going to do is I'm going to keep on adding the questions because we're going to take the questions at the end as well. I am going to bring it up because we are coming up on almost 2 full hours of this, and I want to make sure that we get all the rest of the stuff into it, and then you guys can fire questions off at us as you need to. Just keep in mind that dBASE plus 8 with ADO is the new dBASE, right? It's built on top of 2.8. You have all the structures and capabilities and functionality that you had in 2.8 for the most part, plus a heck of a lot more. There's a lot more stuff that we've put into there, and we've worked a really long time and hard time to try to get all of these features, functionalities, capabilities ready for you guys to use. There's a lot, like I said, there's a lot of new things in there. If you guys don't have the trial yet, we recommend that you go to the dBASE website, click on the Get Trial. You get a 30-day trial, go out there, give it a try, see everything. Now, one thing to keep in mind, we did change the underlying components. A lot of them are now based on the latest and greatest from Microsoft, from the MFC library. And, some behaviors, some objects, events, and methods have changed with the new components. That also means that we recommend for forward compatibility that you can recompile everything. So if you're using libraries, if you're using other things, we recommend that everything that you are using gets recompiled because there are new components, new objects, new methods, new events that could be being exposed. Also keep in mind that some of the older controls may have the same method or same event or same property, but it may have different behavior now. So we recommend recompile and then going out there and doing a complete QA on it because there are some things that have changed inside the toolbars, inside the menus, inside the forms, inside the buttons. There are just different behaviors that you may have programmed because of the old components that need to be updated now. So recompile and then go forward. We also don't recommend taking your stuff back, right? So forward compatibility going from 2.x up to +8, way to go. Going from 8 back may not work so well. There could be a lot of little things that pop up. There could be new events, properties, and methods that actually get exposed that aren't exposed in the old one. So going backwards is a little bit more difficult than what it used to be. Um, Also, besides that, the product is available for you if you're buying a new user license. In other words, if you're a brand new user, you haven't used dBASE before, and you don't have a copy of dBASE, then it's $3.99 US for the license. If you have a copy of dBASE, you're going to be upgrading from that copy. We allow you to upgrade from any version of dBASE. So if you're upgrading from dBASE 4 DOS, you're updating from dBASE 5 DOS, you're updating from Windows 5.7 dBASE, sure, you can go ahead and upgrade for $2.99. We do have copy protection in the product now, so you get to install it and all that, and it registers it and all that kind of good stuff. If you want to purchase it, you can go out to the store. You can go to the main website and say buy, and it'll take you right in and get you set up from that standpoint. So as we've been doing this whole time, Kathy and I have been taking questions, and we'll continue to take some questions here and try to get you the answers that you're looking for. Hopefully, this was a good amount of good set of good use of your time. And at the end of this, we hope that you will take an extra 5 minutes. I know we've almost went 2 hours here, but I hope you'll take an extra 5 minutes when you close out of the webinar here when we're done. You will be presented with 5 questions, right? 5 or 6 questions that ask you, was this a good use of your time? Did you get something out of it? And some other questions into it. But we really need to know, did this cover good information? Do you want additional information and things like that? This webinar will be made available on YouTube for people to watch again at some time. It may be broken up into parts, but the content will be available in some form or fashion. Just remember to fill out the survey afterwards. We really greatly appreciate that if you can do it. And I hope you guys have a great evening, great day, great morning, wherever you may be located. Good night from here. Bye-bye, guys.
Bye.